Hi everyone, welcome back to Tea with the OT. I'm Becca Maddie, an occupational therapist specializing in pediatrics. And today we are talking about one of my favorite tools and strategies to use with my clients and to share with families, and those are called social stories. So I want to just have you for a moment just picture, have you ever been in a situation where you all of a sudden realize you don't know what's coming next, or you're not really sure how to respond or react in a new situation? That's something that some of the kids that I worked with experienced tenfold with just what we perceive as adults as common situations. And so that's where social stories can come in to alleviate some of that anxiety and help support kids as they navigate new or challenging situations for them. So let's talk about first, what is a social story? It's not a rule book or a way to demand compliance. It's really a tool to bridge the gap between here's what we expect from you and talking in the abstract to here is what it looks like to respond in a way that is expected. And so it provides a narrative of a situation that might feel overwhelming or abstract, like a doctor's visit or a change in routine. And so in my practice with Honeybee OT, I've used social stories in several different scenarios, including when a child is having trouble with bedtime, when they are struggling to ask friends to play, or when friends do say no to them when they want to play. What then do they do? Instead of getting angry and upset with that friend or assuming that that person doesn't want to be our friend, we can talk through that situation and put it in a story context that is a little bit easier to grasp and easier for the child to put themselves in the shoes of the main character. And it just helps to illustrate what point we are trying to get across and put it in the language that a child may understand a little bit better. So a social story is a tool that I do recommend repeated use with. However, it's not something that we use during a meltdown or necessarily during this hard situation. That's like trying to read a map while your car is actively having a flat tire. You don't need to know the map right now. You need to address this flat tire, and then you can proceed to figure out where we're going next. So the strategy is to use the social stories during those moments of connection, or when a child is in the green zone, if you're familiar with the zones of regulation, when they're regulated, fed, feeling curious, and repetition is your best friend when this occurs. Social stories also do this lovely thing where they open up the floor for conversation about these situations as well as questions. And so you may learn that there is a part of a situation that your child wasn't quite grasping, that we didn't even realize was happening and that they had a question about. Social stories are also beautiful because they can meet many different developmental levels or ability levels, and we can also provide some creative engagement with the social story for someone who might be more of a visual learner. So I've used social stories using real photos of the child moving through the expected routine, and they're engaged with this. They know that we're making pictures for their story. Or I've used like cartoon photos that are not colored in yet, and then we use it as a coloring book as we talk through. So it's just there's different ways to engage with a social story and different methods in order to allow the child to be more invested in the topic that we're discussing. So I've also used tactile things during a social story. So if we need to, if we're learning about trying a new food, we've used like Velcro pictures to replace what food we're learning about or what food we're trying that day. And that has been also just another way to increase that buy-in from the child that is learning and reading that story with me. And I've also used digital versions of social stories, or even taking it one step further, using video models, which is essentially a people or actors acting out that specific situation, but I will probably talk about video models in another episode of Tea with the OT. But that's just yet another way to engage learners who may be a little bit more digitally motivated. So I just want to highlight here, after discussing what a social story is and how it's used, if this is something you're like, I think that could actually be helpful for us in our family, I do have a Teachers Pay Teacher store called Honeybee OT, and you can head over there. You can check out what different types of social stories, what topics I talk about, and that could maybe get your gears turning about what situations are particularly challenging for your child. Or you can download the social stories that I have. Also, right here on YouTube, there are a couple of my social stories available that I read through, and you can get just a firsthand experience with those social stories, as well as read through them with your child along with me as I read them out loud to the audience. So at the end of the day, a social story is just a way of saying, I see you, I know this is hard, and we're going to work together to get through it. And it's about connecting with your child in this difficult situation over correcting what they might be going through. So this week, I do challenge you to identify one transition or one situation that feels tricky for your family at this moment, and then decide, is this something that we could talk through or could be a story? And I'd love to hear it in the comments. What has been a challenging situation that doesn't feel like a big challenge, but is something that does need to be talked through between you and your child? And we can talk through whether that maybe would be an appropriate social story. I'd love to hear it. Thank you again for joining me for Tea with the OT this month. I really appreciate you taking that time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.